I'm Drew Neal, and we're doing this interview to talk with Sergeant Wood, April Wood, and she's in transition. She would be considered a trans female, and she has been kind enough to talk to us, and we're going to get some idea and some insight as to her journey through this. She's not completely finished in the journey. It's been, well, we'll find out exactly how long it's been. So welcome.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate you being here.
My pleasure.
I think we'll start with in the beginning.
Okay.
When did you think that maybe, what age were you that you thought maybe you weren't like other people your age or your sex or whatever?
It's really hard to answer that question, but if I have to put a time, I would say probably around 5 years old.
Right.
5.
Okay. So we in the psychology field have a name for that, gender dysphoria, which for those of you who are unfamiliar with that term, that means someone feels like they are a different gender than what their anatomical given gender is. And we generally think that children are not really into one identity or the other at age 5 or 6 or something. But it is true, because I've heard it from other people, that people who feel like they're either homosexual or, in this case, in the wrong gender dysphoria, they're aware of it at a pretty early age. So I'm not surprised to hear that answer. Can you give us some idea of how it manifests? What did you made you think that?
Especially from the beginning, my dad got remarried, and my stepsister, she had some of her clothes in my closet, and I started wearing them, and they just felt right to me.
Okay.
And just kind of like, there's something that clicked, and it just made sense. And because I always thought boy clothes were really boring and ugly, and I always just enjoyed wearing her clothes. And so I think that's when I kind of realized that there was something different, because I don't think any boy at the time, you go out and play in the mud and, climb trees and ride bicycles, where, I really enjoyed just kind of in my mind at the time being one of the girls.
Well, the concept of gender identity is a cultural issue. In the United States, for instance, we might say, you might hear a statement like, boys don't play with dolls, that's what
Right.
girls do. And then you bring up, well, isn't G.I. Joe, since you're a military member, isn't G.I. Joe a doll? And isn't it okay for males? Well, that's a different issue. So clearly gender identity is a culturally defined issue. So it sounds as though you're saying you just had a preference from as long as you can remember, and it wasn't quite a good fit with your anatomical gender. So
Especially at that time as a kid, for sure.
did that trouble you in any way, or?
No, it didn't really trouble me. It just made me a little bit confused as far as like, why am I having these feelings? But it never really caused any problems until once I got a little bit older.
What age was that?
I would say that would be around 15, 16,
Okay.
maybe 14.
Were friends of yours dating, and was it a dating issue?
No,
or?
it wasn't dating. We come from a very poor family, and I didn't have my own privacy, so my mom would sometimes find girl clothes, and they'll be like, "Whose are these?" And I'd be like, "I don't know," and she would throw them away, and I would be so upset, and so that's when it first started becoming an issue, when I was around 14, 15, because I wanted to have my own privacy, and try to figure out why,
Right.
figure out what's going on. But really what made it come out to light would be, I would say, the internet.
Well, actually, that's my next issue that I was going to bring up, because one of the reasons you're being interviewed is that for educational purposes at EPCC, and I asked my students to imagine what it was like being either gay or transgender 50 years ago,
Yeah.
and have no one to talk to. In fact, if you take a look at the early sex researchers, just in heterosexuals, we didn't have any books or any research until people like Masters and Johnson came. Kinsey was the first, and it's amazing because the question is, what would you have asked your doctor in 1930 if you felt you were gay or you felt you were gender dysphoric? They wouldn't have any idea what to deal with it.
Right.
So with the advent of the internet, and as I know, there's just tons of stuff on the internet.
Yep.
And it's been, did you find it helpful to be able to resort to the internet to watch posted videos and have some concept of others that were?
Oh, definitely. Like, I remember when I just first saw like what transgender means, it just made sense, and I'm like, that makes sense to me. And I've never really experienced that, because back in that time, I think you would just see them in videos. And I remember one video that pops out as my mind. I forgot what it's called, but it's like they go on a road trip and they get stuck in a town, and they're all like cross-dressers, or I don't forgot what it's called, but I always think of that, and that was kind of like my only perception of what being trans is.
Right.
But once the internet came out and there was all these forums and support groups, it just really just made it so much easier for me to cope and kind of understand why am I feeling what I'm feeling.
Did you, when you look back at it, did you feel like you were experiencing anxiety or depression or?
I was a really happy kid. I was always very active, especially throughout high school, middle school. I never had any depression. More or less, I was more just always curious.
Okay.
I was more curious.
Well, people would be curious as to how you explain to yourself why you are the way you are.
Mm-hmm.
How do you explain that to yourself?
It just feels right.
Well, I mean, you don't have to explain it if it just feels right, right? I mean, it's just the way you are.
That's a hard question.
Well, let me shape it for you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel that you are in this position now because of any social event, any way you were treated as a child or as an adolescent or as an early adult?
No. I was, so my dad is very well off, and we traveled the world every single year. We always went snow skiing. I had an amazing childhood all the way up to I lived with him until I was about 10. Then I moved to LA and with my mother, and it was still a very rewarding. So as a kid growing up, I've had nothing but positive experiences throughout my life. And I don't think that me being trans, or who I am today, reflects off of that.
How about your family? Are they supportive of your decision?
So I don't talk to my dad. My dad
Okay.
doesn't support it. I haven't talked to him for years. My mom, she was upset when I first came out.
Okay.
But now after I first came out, within 3 months.
What age was that?
That was recent. That was a year ago.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So that seems a little surprising to me, since I know you've thought about this for a while. You've had to go through a process in the military to allow this transition for them to okay that. So that doesn't happen overnight. So.
Yeah, my mom was a little distraught. My brothers were like, "Yep, we already knew," and my friends,
Do they support you?
Oh yeah, everybody's supportive except for my dad. Everybody else in my family, friends of family, uncles, aunts, everybody's. super supportive.
Is there any particular person or a group of people that were most helpful to you? Obviously, we're talking about your family now, but outside.
I would honestly have to say my friends. My friends are the most important thing to me, and this is a little bit off the subject, but my friends have really, ever since I started my transition, have been there through the good times to the bad times, and from what I've talked to with other trans women that are going through this process, they don't have a lot of support.
Well, that's why I want to focus on that issue, at least temporarily here, because you had a great childhood. You may not have the 100% support from all your family members now, but you do have support. You just mentioned before we started this conversation about a support group here in El Paso. And so people are getting together, having these discussions, support each other on the emotional side.
Yes.
And it makes sense to me that a person who was in your situation would be very comforted having the ability to talk to somebody who thinks or at least understands what you're going through.
Definitely. I think a lot of people feel alone, especially if they don't have family that support their decision to transition. And so having a support system, even if it's just making friends, I think is so important, because nobody wants to feel lonely, especially going through such a dramatic change in your life. I mean, that's a big decision.
Well, it is a big decision. The last time we met, which was not that long ago, you were still using a male name, and you had just started some hormone treatment. What have you done since the last time we talked?
Just my hormones. I've been on hormones. I've changed my gender in the civilian side as well as in the military side, so I can grow my hair out now, and I have to comply within the military standards of the female regulations.
If I recall right, your voice is different now. Do you perceive your voice is different now?
Yes, I do have a speech therapist that helps me with my voice. Hormones really don't help with that.
Okay.
So it's just all practice.
All right.
Yeah.
And I believe you have a surgery scheduled that's going to put you more in body conforming to your...
Actually, it's next week. I have my breast augmentation, which I'm super excited about. And so there's like this stigma about, because of certain people put it out, that transgender people in the military cost a lot of money. So for my hormones, it probably costs the taxpayer maybe $90 a month, which in fiscal year of 2017, just for transgender soldiers at the time, it was they spent about $1.4 million, which might seem a lot of money, but just on Viagra for fiscal year 2017, they spent $28 million. And so if you were to make a pie, right, and get the whole entire military budget for healthcare, transgender people spend 0.001%.
Well, one of the things the military is known for, and I know citizens want our military, and I've spent 26 years in the military, so I know that our citizens want our soldiers to be taken care of. So do you feel like the U.S. Army is taking care of you?
Oh, definitely. But just like I said, like my breast augmentation, I have to pay for that. Army's not paying for any surgeries or anything like that. So pretty much the Army just pays for the hormones, but there's this misconception that the military pays for surgeries for us. That's not true, as of right now.
Well, I'm glad you clarified that, because some of us would probably argue that the Army takes you as you are. They do a process where you go through, and once you're in, you're in. And somebody would not be in a position to say, if you had a medical need, that they would would deny you that because they didn't particularly agree with your need.
Right.
I suppose it's the way you frame this issue. Students often ask the question about, are people born gay? Are people born with gender dysphoria? And I don't know that there's 100% agreement in the psychology or the medical field, but many of us believe that compelling stories like yours makes it clear this is not a social choice that you decided and in your case it wasn't because of some trauma or conflict you had as a child, and this is something that you've thought long and hard about, and it was not an easy decision, but it was a correct decision.
I agree.
Would you say once you made the decision, when you came out to begin with, and now in the transition, you're absolutely crystal clear you're doing
definitely.
the right thing?
I would, if I were to go back in time, I would have done it a long time ago. I think that it has been in a great transition so far, and I would not go back for anything. It's been really, really good. So, yeah.
How long? You've just basically started within a year of the.
It's actually going to be a year this month. I think it's going to be a year November 8th.
All right. So
yeah.
And then how much more time have they told you that it might take?
So for the rest of my life. Transition, unfortunately, how it works is usually with hormones, it takes about 2 years. 2 years is when the hormones will do whatever it is that they're going to do as far as change your body. And for the rest of my life, I have to take hormone replacement therapy. But for the first 2 years is when you really see a lot of the differences and changes within your body, the way you think.
Well, I'd be interested in hearing that. How has taking hormones affected your thinking? Because it seems as though you were pretty clear about what you needed to do even at an early age. So how would you characterize your thinking that's may have changed?
One thing I've noticed is I'm a lot more caring. I've always been a very caring person, but I feel like this need to mother now, and it's really interesting. And also, I'm a lot more emotional. I cry a lot easier.
Okay.
Especially at work if I'm upset. So emotional, and one thing was, so I've been married before.
Okay.
With a genetic female, and I've always been with females. I've only been with a few males, but especially being on hormones, it definitely has changed the way I see males and females, because I kind of cater more towards males now.
Okay.
That's just something, and I've never really catered to either one, but now that I'm going through this, I kind of feel I'm leaning a little bit to the male side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that might change in the future if you've been on these hormones for a longer amount of time?
Definitely. I think it could. I think it could. And for me personally, because I know I'm not perfect, but in a sense, the person that I see myself with gender is not that big a deal for me. It's all about the person. So, yes, it does play its role, right? But
yes.
I would say that I'm a little bit more not as picky. I'm a little bit more open as far as who I want to be with in a relationship. It doesn't have to be a male.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a female too, because what really comes down to it, for me personally, is just support system, communication, and a good friendship.
Well, I'm pleased to hear you say that, because this is a question that we talk about in class frequently. That one of the examples I use is we have a little video clip of a gay couple who've been together for about 22 years.
Okay.
And one of them decided to go through transition.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question, the critical thinking question that we're trying to focus on in this program is, what is love? If you love your partner, you've been with them for 22 years,
Right.
and they anatomically change, which is what this person was going through, the gender transition reassignment surgery, why would you think that those two people would not be together? I mean,
Right. And it does happen. I mean, unfortunately, with my ex-wife, we got divorced because she didn't want to be with a female. And so I respect that, because at the time when I got married with her, I didn't know I was going to ever transition. Being in the military, the whole don't ask, don't tell was still going on. I didn't think it was ever going to be an option. I just kind of just let it be, put it in the back burner.
okay.
But yes, when I told her what was going to happen, this is what I want to do, she was kind of okay with it. She tried to work with it, but in the long run, she was like, no, I can't do this.
Well, some people look at that as like marriage is a contract, and you contract for a certain agreement between the two of you and what you understood at the time.
Right, definitely.
So if someone changes in their, well, for you, I wouldn't say it was a change. It was more of a, or would you say it was an awakening in a more comfortable level of what you were going to do?
Yeah, I can say that.
But, you know, I'm not trying to be critical of anybody who's in your life, but I mean, if you were lovable then, you're probably as lovable or more now than you were back then. But I can understand also the idea of a contract that somebody didn't buy into the concept of being married to a same-sex person if they married a heterosexual person in the beginning. So I can see both sides of it. But I would guess that for you, you know how to love people regardless of what their anatomical gender is and
Definitely.
regardless of what their identity is as far as how they see. Is that fair to say?
Definitely.
Some people have a hard time to understand that. I think the bottom level is if you love somebody, you love somebody. I mean, we love people in different ways, and it makes sense to me that's the common denominator.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Well, what do you want to do with this now? I mean,
Well, I just started. I mean, this is I'm 32. I mean, I'm just kind of starting out. Right now, I'm just kind of going through the motions as far as getting my surgeries done and trying to get feeling as close and looking as close as a female as I can. And I mean, I really just want to like support people. So I'm a little bit of kind of like an activist. That's in a sense where I've always felt this need to just really support people, help people that are in need. So if me transitioning, I know there's a lot of transgender people out there that support groups and like Caitlyn Jenner for one.
right.
A lot of people say that she did really good for the transgender community and really brought it out to light. And I don't think I'll ever have that much exposure, but I'm not looking for exposure, but I'm looking for just to help people. And so, like I was mentioning to you earlier, before we started, I'm trying to start this support group within the military for transgender soldiers, because there is nothing like that. So that I guess is my legacy that I would like to leave.
Well, that would be a great legacy to leave, and I'm hoping that this interview, which will be available to other instructors and perhaps even broadcast on TV, that to help people understand that underneath the uniform and regardless of what your physical manifestations are, you're a human and a loving person and with a personality and feelings and thoughts, and it's particularly impressive that you have made a good career in the military. You're an accomplished soldier, and you're about to be deployed again, so we will not be seeing you for a while. Hopefully you'll come back to Fort Bliss. Yes. What would you want people who are watching this, what would you want them to know what is a big message you'd like to send them?
Pretty much, especially with me being in the military, there's a stigma about transgender people, that they're weak, they're confused, they don't know what they want. I can tell you firsthand from my experience being in the military and being in the position I am. I'm actually, so right now I work in a position higher than my rank, and I've been placed there on purpose because I'm competent. I can do whatever's asked of me. My soldiers respect me 100%. They have my back. I don't have any issues at work. And so really, I think there's just this bad social stigma about transgender people because a lot of it what the media portrays.
Right.
And then also, just like anything, you can do something perfect 100 times, but that one time you mess up, that's what people remember. And so unfortunately, there are transgender people out in society that kind of don't put a good light on successful and people that are just trying to fulfill their lives and be successful. And so they see those type of people, and usually they're on drugs or because like I said, they don't have that support group or that support going through the transition, so they kind of fall through the cracks. Well, and so for me, what I would like to leave is just that we're here, we're working among everybody, and we're not weak. We're not weak.
Well, you certainly don't give that impression. It reminds me that the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association in 1973 decided that homosexuality was no longer going to be determined to be a mental illness.
Yeah.
And they made that decision because people who are working with patients who feel this way, pretty much exactly what you said, they're very comfortable with that decision. It's not a conflict within them.
Right.
It's perhaps a conflict with our society back in 50 years ago almost. And I see that the transgender issue is becoming a little more acceptable and certainly knowledgeable. People fail to realize there's been gay people and probably transgender people for sure since civilization's been around.
Right.
It's just not something that people understood. And like I said, before Kinsey and Masters and Johnson, we didn't even understand heterosexuality. So I'm pleased to hear that. Do you have, are you knowledgeable of other people who are considering or transitioning their gender in the military?
Oh yes. So like I said, I'm pretty active within the transgender community within Fort Bliss.
Okay.
Within the military. So I know of four other soldiers that are transitioning. 2 are pilots. And then we have 1 other soldier that's a maintainer, and then another soldier that's a maintainer, and then myself. But I do know as of right now, on Fort Bliss in a whole, there is roughly about 12 to 13 soldiers transitioning.
That you're aware, that you personally are aware of, right?
And not personally, but that I know of.
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
Another thing that some people have a hard time with either people who are gender dysphoric or people who are homosexual, that these stereotypes continue to exist, that people make these decisions because of this weakness, this frailness, maybe because of conflicts within their family or their childhood. And you're probably familiar, I can't remember her name right off the top of the bat, but I think she's an excellent example as well. She's a retired Navy SEAL who decided to transition
Yes.
after she retired.
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
And you would say, now wait a minute, people. I may have shared the Army uniform like you, but I have a lot of respect for somebody who's a Navy SEAL because I know what kind of training they went through.
Oh,
So
yes,
I mean, it's
definitely.
not just
a lot of respect to them.
I mean, the failure rate in that system of people who are incredibly talented, physically, mentally, and every other way, don't make it to SEAL training. So,
Right.
a person who's been through that is quite an accomplished soldier, and so there's nothing weak or feminine or I don't know. It's just I wish people would get off of that stereotype. It's
Definitely.
it's not helpful.
Yep.
Well, what's next for you? Are you? I know obviously you're still on a contract, so are you going to make the Army?
Yep, I plan
career?
on. I plan on doing 20 years, if not plus 20 years, whenever the military kicks me out. My goal is to try to get up to first sergeant, if not sergeant major.
Well, we have a Sergeant Major Academy right down the street here, so.
I mean, that's the ultimate goal. Will I do it? I don't know, but I'm definitely going to try.
Well, it's good to know that you're functioning as a rank higher than what you've got pinned on, and that is, for those of you who don't understand the military, that is a compliment, and it is a recognition of your skills and abilities. Now, I have some people in the audience who may have some questions based on this interview or has been waiting patiently to ask us some questions. So I think we can probably hear your questions. If you want to just one at a time, somebody shoot one out for April.
Okay. So you talked about having surgery for
Mhm.
your breast augmentation. What about your genitals? Do you plan to eventually do that?
That I don't. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, do you plan to change?
I don't know yet. I do get asked that question. It's kind of, I don't know. And the reason why I say I don't know because that's a big decision. I have a few people that have gotten that surgery and they're completely happy and content, and I've had some that wish they never did it. And so,
Let me start. I should have repeated the question. The question was, I think you've already announced that you're going to have the breast augmentation. The question had to do with the below the waist changes to adapt to gender conformity of a female, and your answer is you're not quite ready to do that yet.
yeah, because it is a big step. It's really expensive. And it really, honestly, the biggest factor in that decision is where am I going to be at mentally in about 2 years, and also who I'm going to be with, because I do want to take that into consideration too. So
I'm sorry. Is that because you may want to be with a male person?
no, definitely correct. And so it just, I mean, because there's a lot of males that like transgender people because we have something else extra down there, but that's not what I want the basis of my relationship to be. But at the same time, I want to be desirable, if that makes sense.
Well, listen to your speaking. It made me think that the highest priority for you is to be consistent with your gender identity.
Yes.
And you've done that. I mean, you've declared that you are consistent with your identity. So you now are no longer dysphoric because you are a female in every, well, not every sense of the word, but every sense of the mental identity part of it. So the question about physicality would seem to me a little bit secondary to that.
Definitely.
Is it fair to say you're much more comfortable now as a female
yes.
than you were as a male?
Oh, yes, definitely. Because nobody sees that. So, but everybody sees this. And this was more important to me. But yes, that is totally secondary.
Well, and let's, since we're on the subject of anatomy, the idea of having breasts that are more associated with the female physique is a congruence with the way that your identity is a female, correct?
Definitely.
So the other surgery below the waist is something that doesn't need to be done, may not be done. It's up in the air, but there's no question you're female and you're running the rest of your life as a female.
Definitely. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And I like your insight that it's not an issue today. Give it some time, and you'll figure out. When you say desirable, I'm hoping that what you meant by that was whoever you fall in love with, whoever falls in love with you, is in love with you however you are, and then
Yes.
if there has to be some kind of adjustment before or after, then that's something you guys could do together, folks could do together. Any other questions?
Yeah, one more question. So you talked about being married, divorced.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any kids involved?
The question was there any children involved? I almost asked that question earlier. I know the answer to that, but I'll go ahead and let you answer.
No kids. I did, when I started my transition, my doctor did ask me if I wanted to put some, have a sperm. So if I did have to choose to have kids down the road, I had that opportunity. I don't plan on having kids myself. I do actually end up planning on adopting because there's a lot of homeless kids out there, and if I can give them a good home, when that's already here, I'd rather afford that to a kid. child.
Has your attitude about having children, not birthing children, but having children, changed since you've been on hormones?
I don't know. I mean, because I think it also kind of goes together because I am getting older. So as you get older and you don't have kids and you see your friends with kids, you kind of just feel like that, I want one, And so, yeah, I do want to have kids.
Well, you don't realize you have a biological clock now. So before you didn't have a clock. Now you do.
And so, so I think my whole plan is once I get out of the military, because the military does take us away from home so much. Once I get out, I plan on adopting.
Okay.
That's the plan for kids. But to answer the question, again, no kids. No kids. We just had a dog. That was all.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So April, is it fair to say that you were raised as a male, like through your childhood? I know you said you had a good childhood. I'm going somewhere with this question, but it's kind of two-part. So in our society, masculinity and stuff like that is really different, right? So boys are taught not to cry, or oh, hey, you got to man up, you got to do whatever. So do you think that in some sense that it might be easier for a trans male to transition in our society and maybe seek help and get help, or ask questions, than it is for a male to do the same, or a male to female, a trans female to do the same? Do you think that there's a stigma or a difference, just kind of like there is with more people are prone to say like, oh, I'm okay with two girls kissing, but two guys kissing, that's no good.
The question is, obviously, April was raised as a male and learned from her socialization what the role of a male is in this society, which is not the same across the world here. There are different gender identity, again, is or gender role, I should say, not identity, but gender role is defined as a social construct. So the question was, do you think that as a person who was socialized as a male, is in your mind, is that a easier, harder, or equal transition if other people who are going from female to male? Is there something about the differences between male roles and female roles in the United States that would affect how easy a transition would be?
No, that's a great question, actually. So, yes, when I was being raised, I was raised as a boy. I wasn't really afforded to play with dolls or anything that was fluffy and with pink. So as I'm going through this transition and meeting other transgender people, I do know this one person that's transitioning, that he's transitioning from female to male. And I brought up this question to her: do you think that it's more socially acceptable than a female to act manly or for a male to act girly? And she said, well, definitely. Like, nobody wants to see a girly guy, but nobody minds seeing a girly or a boy, a boyish girl. And so in the military, especially, I see this, that there's a lot of females that are very masculine in the military, and that would maybe even consider like they want to transition because they have the short hair, they wear the baggy clothes, but I can totally tell there's no stigma or any issues with that. Now, with me going through transition, I mean, I could tell, even though everybody's been very respectful, I can tell that there's a little bit like hesitant.
Okay.
People are a little bit more hesitant, maybe not carried that much of a conversation with me now, I noticed too. It really hasn't, it hasn't affected anything, but I noticed that there is a little bit of a transition when it comes to people, the way they interact with me now. I feel like they kind of have to be a little bit more careful, but they don't, but I think that maybe they're trying to like, I don't know what's
Are
going
these
through
people
there.
who knew you when you were identifying as a male?
Yes.
So it's not people who meet you for the first time?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, and I could definitely tell that there is a difference a little bit there. But on the flip side, though, it's not always negative. Some of the other guys, they open doors for me now, and they help me lift heavy things.
Okay.
So it's not all bad or all negative. But I've definitely noticed that it is a lot easier for a female to transition as a male in society than a male to transition to a female, for sure.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
April, I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned a little earlier about the social media aspect, I think when you were 15 or so, and how it maybe had helped you, cope and learn and explore and so forth. How would you describe sort of that social media dynamic now that you're a little older, you're in transition? Would you say it continues, or it has helped you? Would you say that it's changed from the time that you were 15 until now? Because I'm curious about people that are maybe younger individuals than yourself, who are transitioning, and what they see in terms of that social media being maybe it's more acceptable, it's more bullying. What would you say from your perspective, the social media dynamic has been from the time you first explored and saw that, oh my gosh, there's people just like me, to who you are now?
The question had to do with the impact of social media on April's life from when she first found the internet and looking about things and thinking about things as to where you are today. So that's a very interesting question as to the metamorphosis of what's happened, if you've seen that at all.
Yes, and that's a great question. To start off to answering that question, when I was young, I remember in 2008, I wanted the best computer ever, and my mom got it for me. I had a Pentium 3 processor, so it was like the best thing out. And so the internet was dialed up, and you had the static and the little running man, right? And I remember always being very curious and then just always trying to find, and normally back then, and that's one thing that still happens now, if you put transgender into the search box, back then it was AOL, normally like porn and not so much support would show up. It would just be more like a sexual thing. But being young, I sift through all that, and I did find some support groups. The main support group, especially back and then, was Yahoo support groups. They had Yahoo groups, and then also Meetup. There was this website called Meetup, and that's how I really got to find out like what transgender is and who's out there. Now, fast forward to 2018, there's so much out there, but it's still, I mean, I connect with people across the country now, and also especially in LA where I'm from. I have a lot of friends out there that I connect with, and we do use social media for events. There's a lot of events now. Back in the day, there wasn't a lot of events, especially for the LGBT community, that you would have to know somebody to kind of
Right.
know if there was an event going on. Where we're now, it's broadcasted everywhere, and I think it's been really good, especially Google or Yahoo News. They'll I don't know if it depends on like what you look at, but a lot of times something will pass through like, hey, this event's happening, or this, Pride event, is going on, or, there's some hate, so it's I think it's a lot better, personally. I think it's really good, and yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
What message would you want to give?
Oh, wait, I have one more thing.
Go ahead.
Sorry. One more thing. So, about social media. So, the other day I was at the mall, and it was one of my first times actually like shopping for bras at Victoria's Secret. I was super excited. And this one lady comes up to me, and she says, excuse me, do you mind if I talk to you real quick? And I'm like, no, ma'am, of course. Like, how can I help you? And I'm like, I don't work here, though. And so she's all like, well, I just noticed that you're trans, and my son's going through trans.
Right.
And we don't know anything. We don't know where to even really start. We want to get her on hormones. And I'm like, well, yeah, definitely, give me your phone number, and her daughter, son, showed up, and I met her, and really nice, and I think she's 17 or 18. So they had a lot of questions as far as like, well, who do we see? How do we get the process started? How many doctors? What doctors? And so I gave her a link. I got her phone number, and I gave her links on all the information that will help her out, especially like changing her name and her gender. So social media, in a sense, kind of helped me do that for them.
Okay.
Because maybe back in the day, I would have been like, well, let's go like have dinner, because I'm gonna have to like talk to you about everything. Where now I was able to just really hand off the torch with all the information, and it was really nice.
Well, I think it was a good segue to what my last question was going to be, which was if you were talking to the 15-year-old April back in the day, what advice would you have for her today?
I would say the best advice that I can give you is there's always people out there that will accept you.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid of reprisal, and always just be who you feel you are. And I think the world, the world and society is getting a lot better now as far as acceptance. And I think that if you're hesitant, or you're on the borderline, on the fence, I just go for it, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of people out there that will support your cause.
Thank you. I really appreciate you meeting with us and discussing your personal life. I'm very optimistic that it will help somebody who's going to listen to this program, and maybe settle their heart and give them hope that it is not a mental illness. It is a choice based on your inner feeling that you've had for a very long time.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sergeant. Good night.
All right. I do okay? I tried not to say because I do a lot of crush words.
Tough. Too late.
So, when
I
you
said
say,
15 minutes.